So it's been a very interesting week one for the Detroit Lions in their NFL minicamp. And as you can see by the title, today we're talking about why I think defensive end slash outside linebacker Charles Harris is the key for this team and their plan at edge rusher. And of course, that's opposite Aiden Hutchinson, a guy who's blossoming into that next level pass rusher. Now, before we get into this, I want to shout out Pride of Detroit's 5 guys who really stood out in week one at training camp. That's Charles Harris, clap it up for him. Sam Laporta, clap it up for him. Starlin Thomas, Jared Goff, and the Sun God, Amon-Ra St. Brown. So all good players, and really the key thing that I think a lot of people are looking at, Starlin Thomas. If you want a video specifically talking about Starlin Thomas and what are his true talents and how can he carve a role out with this team, not only as a special teamer, but as potentially being a guy who contributes in the secondary, just let me know that below in the comments. We'll find whatever we can find. When we look, we go get it. Now, also, shout out to Pride of Detroit for that information. Link is down in the description. But so when I talk about Charles Harris and why I think he's key to this team's plan at edge rusher, I go back to those last 2 seasons at Missouri. Had 7 sacks in one, had 9 sacks in the other one. And looking at a guy who has a lot of athleticism. And when I was looking at some of the things with Harris, did not pick up that football until he was a junior in high school. So understanding that, and this is a guy who was a first-round pick, 22nd overall in 2017 for the Miami Dolphins. So he has a lot of talent. We understand that by now. I think the biggest thing with him, staying healthy in this season, staying healthy through training camp, but looking at his talent. And why I think he can be key in this role, we know we got John Kaminsky. We know about James Houston. We know about Romeo Okwara, who I think is kind of the wild card in this scenario. But I think Charles Harris is a guy who has a lot of athleticism. And I don't talk about, as far as being the fastest guy. He ran a 4.8. We all know that by now. But I think he's a guy who's comfortable dropping back into coverage and what we want to do defensively, because when I look at teams and I look at players and how they fit the scheme, it has to make sense from a football standpoint rather than just a name, rather than just a guy in a place. So trying to get to that 3-3-5 look and giving teams disguised looks with Coach Aaron Glenn, I don't think it's going to be traditional. I don't think it's going to be that true Sam linebacker out there. And trying to get it out of that nickel look, sometimes that nickel will kick into be that Sam guy, like I talked about a lot, if he's not playing that slot corner role, depending on the offensive formation. But what is the true importance of getting that 3-5 look against some of these heavy run teams? Facing the Chicago Bears in this division, facing the Minnesota Vikings, facing the Green Bay Packers, teams who run the football, and trying to get into that 3-5, you can get it out of that same nickel look. And all you have to do is you're going to have that slot corner. Now you can have Kaminsky on one end. You can have Aiden Hutchinson on the other end. And now having Charles Harris as that other guy, being kind of the outside linebacker where you could have Kaminsky lined up in a 4, in a 3 tech. So that's the type of thing that can be done doing stunts. But when he drops back into that Sam role, being the linebacker right there, I think he has a lot of potential in that role. And when I first saw it, I was like, why is Charles Harris dropping into Sam? And then I saw it. And then I looked at some of the things he did in Missouri. He dropped back into coverage. So this is nothing new to Charles Harris. And seeing that for the defense, and I talked about James Houston, a guy who could also do the same thing. Also played off the ball linebacker actually before he became an edge rusher. So I think that's a big thing that has to be looked at and that has to be monitored when we talk about this team and talk about their plan for edge rusher. And also adding to that, if he hits his ceiling, we talk about ceiling so much, but if he does that, get about 7 sacks, 6 to 7 sacks for Charles Harris, and then we get about, however many James Houston can get. I don't want to place a ceiling on him because I think it's kind of unknown. The film tells me a lot, but I want to see with teams game planning for him, with him getting more reps. Now we understand how he's trying to attack us as an offensive lineman. So I'm not saying he won't have the same production, but I do want to see it. I think he has the bend, he has the speed to power, all the things he can do as a pass rusher. So hypothetically, I'm thinking if he gives that same 8 sacks, if he gives that same production in a full season, along with Charles Harris, along with what Kaminsky can give you, along with Aiden Hutchinson, I don't think it's the plan that I have seen from some Detroit Lions fans and media as far as going to get a guy. And the more I think about it, I think Charles Harris, what he can do, dropping in the coverage, getting after the quarterback with his athleticism, along with James Houston, has some of the best been in the entire NFL, along with John Kaminsky, who can do the stunts and different types of things from inside and outside. Just one of those bigger bodies, kind of a different type of athlete. There's not a lot of John Kaminsky's in the NFL, so he's that bigger prototypical defensive end. But having that and then having Aiden Hudson, that's where you're really leaning your hard hat on and expecting him to get double-digit sacks. And Aiden Hudson is my favorite player on the Detroit Lions. So, I mean, I think that's how I even got drawn in to, covering the Detroit Lions, seeing Aiden Hudson, how he plays football. But what do you guys think about that? What do you think about my thoughts on the plan for the Detroit Lions, for their edge 2, and for really getting their production out of edge rushers outside of Aiden Hudson? Like I said, we're going to have guys dropping in the coverage, going to have Charles Harris getting after the quarterback. And the reason I say that, I'm seeing him get a lot of first-team reps. And the more I think about it, it does make sense. Now, key thing I want to say, when defending the edge, I think this is the last point I want to touch on. James Houston has to improve. Charles Harris has to improve. Looking at some of the other guys, I think Romeo Okwara is pretty solid in that area. John Kaminsky, he can defend the edge. So him and Aiden Hudson, two guys I'm really looking at to lean on as far as defending our wide zone schemes defensively. And how can we use guys like Charles Harris, use guys like James Houston to still defend the edge and hold that contain against the run? Something I'm really looking at. So training camps right now, it's going on, it's battling, it's going down. And some of the questions I have, like I said, I want to look at a lot of this when guys are padded up. When pads are on, we playing real football. We kind of still in that pajama party. It's hyped up and it's ramped up. It means a little bit more for production and for, the depth chart. But when rubber meets the road, pads will be on. Dan Campbell, he likes to bite kneecaps. You can't bite kneecaps if you can't hit somebody in 7-on-7s. 11-on-11. I think that comes next week. So that's when I'm really looking at some things that we may revisit this conversation. Brad Holmes, you never can count him out. I'm not making rumors, but if a move's to be made, Brad Holmes is a guy who's going to go get it. So I'm looking at that. But right now, my current thoughts on their plan, opposite Aiden Hudson.